listening to Hungry for More, an Epicurean's Dilemma, and I'm your host, Trish Close. Amanda Arrigotti-White on the podcast today. She's the founder and CEO of Curate Co, a marketing agency that specializes in food, beverage, and hospitality brands. Right up my alley. Amanda's also from the Pacific Northwest, so I liked her immediately. We got along great. She's my new best friend. She got her PR start at Columbia Sportswear, worked for Sorel a bit, footwear company, kind of bounced back and forth. She then got a job at St. Michel Wine Estates doing PR. They support several different wine brands. And she says that's when this idea came to her of starting her own PR company. It was scary at first, of course. She's now in year 8. She's learned so much along the way. In fact, she shares lots of really good PR advice in this interview. So y'all take some notes. The biggest takeaway, though, for me, something that I already knew, and it's my new soapbox, and that is storytelling. It all comes down to storytelling. You have to know your story. You have to know who you are in order to sell your brand. So Amanda, thank you for confirming that for me. I'm basically a PR expert. Here's Amanda Arrigotti-White. I haven't done a podcast interview. You're like, oh, cool. I'm glad I signed on to this. I haven't done a podcast interview in a month. I took July off a little bit. So,
I mean, you're fresh. You had some time off. That's
I don't know
great.
about fresh. Amanda, help me. Is it Arrigotti? Arrigotti?
Arrigotti.
It's Italian, right?
Is my dad's side's Italian. That's
Arrigotti.
crazy.
And then White is
My husband. My married.
So you went from Arrigotti to White.
Yeah, that's the hyphenation. I couldn't lose the Arrigotti.
Absolutely not. I was just gonna say you went from Arrigotti to White. It's kind of like womp womp womp.
I know. So I decided a hyphenation was a nice of both worlds.
100%. Also, I just feel like my last name, maiden name, became my middle name. Like that's me, right? I can't let go of that.
Totally. I completely agree. I love that.
Okay, Amanda Arrigotti-White, thank you for being on the podcast. So excited to talk to you today.
Thank you for having me.
You are the founder and CEO of Curate Co. This is a PR company, marketing agency specializing in food, beverage, and hospitality brands. So you're really out there helping these really cool companies kind of get their face and name forward, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what we do. I feel like we work directly with media as well as influencers and directly to the consumer on social media to tell brand stories and reach their target audience.
Beautiful. I have so many questions for you, especially like how you got into this and how you decided to create this company, because I just know my little baby tiny company, it's so scary when you're out there and you're just starting this and you have no idea what tomorrow is going to bring. I mean, I'm sure you face that.
Absolutely. I feel like every single day, no matter if it's the first week of starting a business, and now we're about to be at eight years in October. And thank you. But it never stops. I feel like it's just new challenges, new question marks, new things where you're like, well, I guess we're going to figure that out today.
Mm-hmm. I love that attitude. You have to do that. You have to navigate, right? You can't just go, well, I don't know what to do. So you have to navigate. We're going to get into all of this, Amanda, but first, where are you from originally, ma'am?
I am originally from Portland, Oregon. I was born in Seattle, but we moved to Portland when I was in like first grade. So Portland is still very much home.
Okay. And this was, give me a year. Around what time is this, Portland?
So it would be from 1994 until like 2014, 15.
Okay.
I was in Portland the entire time.
I mean, nothing against Portland now. It's having some struggles, but it's also just surviving as Portland does. But when you were in Portland, I mean, that's kind of like not the heyday, but that was when it was like really popping, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've seen 3 stages in my lifetime of Portland. Like when I was growing up, Portland was not the cool Portlandia hipster food scene. It was starting to emerge, but it was just kind of like, a medium to small city. And then when I came back, I moved back after undergrad to Portland and worked from Portland. And that was its like heyday. Like I felt like everyone knew Portland. If I was going and traveling to Manhattan, people would say, oh, I really want to visit Portland. It's on my list of food cities. And then I moved away. And when I came and visited, especially during COVID, it was like wow, what is this city? Like it had a rough time during COVID, especially.
Super rough time, and it hurts my heart to see some parts of the city, even today, even how they are. But there is still this beauty and kind of like roughness to the city that I just love so much.
Yeah, so I think when we spoke last, it was in July. So my husband and I and our 2-year-old went to the Pacific Northwest for the entire month of July. And that was the longest period of time I've been back to just, Washington and Oregon in almost, I want to say a decade almost. And so I still forget, even coming from and like growing up into the Pacific Northwest, how stunning the landscape is. It is truly like nothing else. And I'm from there and I still kind of have these moments. I'm like, oh, we should stop, take a photo.
For real. I mean, I've lived in Southern Oregon for 22 years now, and there will just be a moment where early morning I'm driving through and the sun's hitting a range in a certain way, and I'm just like, are you kidding me? I live here? What? So,
It,
yeah. Yes, it's absolutely an incredible place, and I can't even imagine growing up in Portland. I just had a question for, oh yeah. Do you ever, even now, when I tell people I'm from Oregon, their eyes light up. They go, oh, does that happen to you?
I feel like it has happened more. So I kind of went from Portland, I moved to Seattle, and then I lived in Jacksonville, Florida for a while.
Mhm.
And that was also, I think, like the height of Portland. I had that every time I would say I'm from Portland. People would always say, oh my gosh, that's like, I want to move there. I want to visit. Now I feel like I have to justify it because I'm in Boston. So I have to say it's the other Portland because there's Portland, Maine too. And when I say Portland, they instantly think I'm talking about Maine because so many transplants are born and raised in Portland and come down to Boston as the big city. So that's been my experience is moving to Boston.
Love it. Love it. So was food important growing up in Portland? Was that important to your family?
Growing up as a kid, it wasn't something that played a huge part, I would say. So my mom was a really good cook, just home cook, home baker. Like she makes still to this day the best cookies. Um, she's had a kind of a transition in her own career, but she's now a lawyer. But before that, she actually owned a preschool, a Montessori preschool. So as part of that, they would like make lunches for the kids. So I grew up, I think my mom has perfected the like comfort kid food, like homemade mac and cheese, homemade chicken noodle soup, like cookies, like those types of things. And so that was like growing up, that was kind of my experience of food. We didn't really go out that much. I feel like there was a transition around the time of like late middle school, high school. So my parents were divorced when I was in middle school. Both within a couple years had found what their now is my stepmom and stepdad. And my stepmom is a vegetarian. She's originally from Germany. She's an ultra marathon runner, yoga. Like she had a very different type of food that she would cook. So it was a big transition of when I would be at my dad's house, like we'd eat really good fish and veggies and like quinoa and like all that was introduced to me circa like middle school, high school time frame. Um, and then I feel like my first real integration of like food scene and restaurants and production and stuff like that wasn't until my 20s when, girlfriends and I would start going wine tasting. And then I was in-house at St. Michel Wine Estates, which obviously opened the floodgates.
Hugely, hugely. I love that. Step parents. I have a stepdad, and I'm from the South, so food growing up was incredible. Like I come from a long line of incredible cooks on all sides of my family. But my stepdad he would be cooking something like beef stroganoff, and I'm like, what is that? Like I've never heard of it. Like it looks kind of like dog food. Like what's happening here? But I love the fact that you had these influences in your life. And dad's Italian, right?
Yes, dad's Italian. Although dad's side of Italian, I feel like I didn't get the full Italian experience because my grandma is a horrible cook. She's
Oh
the first one
no.
to tell you that.
Oh
Like,
no. Oh no, grandma. No, that breaks my heart. Did dad cook?
he was like a one trick pony. Like he had a couple meals that were really, really good and still does, but by no means was he like the home cook, home chef.
Okay. I see now though, do you feel like, because I called you overachiever when you hopped on the call, because I mean, your little resume, not little, your big old fat resume is like, good Lord. Do you feel like you got some of this overachieving from mom?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Definitely. She's had so many different, I feel like she's had multiple career paths, and at each step of the way, she's excelled. She actually just published her first book too. That's a fictional novel, and
What?
yeah, so I definitely get it for my mom.
She kind of sounds like I don't know if I would want to mess with mom.
Yeah, yeah.
Attorney, right? She was a lawyer, is a lawyer, or was a lawyer.
She's a lawyer, yeah, and an employment attorney.
Dang. And she owned a preschool and dealing with small kids, that takes a whole different kind of human to deal with small children.
I know. I was pretty lucky. I definitely hit the lottery with my mom and my
Oh,
dad. But mom, I think I get some of the overachiever of for sure.
I love it. Are you a make your bed first thing in the morning person?
Most of the time. Once in a while, now that I have a 2-year-old,
Okay.
it happens a little bit less. And my husband actually was until about like 7, 8 years ago, was in the military. So he definitely is also a make your bed. So it's almost like who's going to get to it first.
Oh, yeah. So my husband was also in the military, but he's not making I make the bed in the mornings. I'm a little bit, I have some control issues, Amanda. I have a few control issues.
I think, don't we all? Isn't
Yes.
that normal?
I sure hope so. So let's talk about then you graduate high school in Portland
Yes.
and you went to Gonzaga, studying what?
Business with a concentration in marketing. I actually started off in undergrad thinking I was going to go the lawyer path, and had done a couple different summers from high school into college interning at a couple law firms around Portland, and realized quickly that I did not want to go that path.
Yeah.
So decided marketing. I was always a little bit I had a little bit of left brain, right brain, but I really liked the creativity that I was starting to see from some marketing classes. So went full on into that.
Love it. And so with marketing, I know marketing, you can market a bazillion different things. Did you have was there anything where oh, that's what I want to go work for that company and help market their brand?
No, but I think I was always excited about the lifestyle side of things, of consumer focused products, not necessarily business to business. And really early on, so I think it was my junior summer before graduating, I had a summer internship at Columbia Sportswear headquarters, which is also in Portland. And they also own like Mountain Hardwear, Sorel, a couple other subsidiary brands. And that definitely opened my eyes to, I think, both the facets of marketing, but also how fun it can be to have those type of lifestyle product focused marketing campaigns and initiatives.
I had the opportunity, the friends and family discount day at Columbia store.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fun. That's a lot of fun.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
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 And working in the PR department, I eventually entered into the PR department a couple years after I started. And we would do these epic trips where we would take fitness writers or gear editors out to destinations to have them like gear test so they could actually understand what the product does. So we'd go to Whistler and take them skiing. We'd go to the Florida Keys and take them deep sea fishing. And these are like Manhattan, Shape Magazine, Self Magazine, like those types of publications. So my roommates at the time loved me. Like I had so much product because I had to be decked head to toe for work for these trips. So I would have like 8 outfits per trip, and every season it has to be new product. So I still have quite a bit of Columbia stuff from those years.
That is just dumb. Florida Keys, just farting around in Key West. I love it. That's amazing. Well, so how long did you work for? Because I read you worked for Sorel and Columbia Sportswear.
Yeah, so I switched around a little bit. It's all within, at least at the time, I'm not sure if it's different now. I think it's separated out, but at the time, Sorel was a fairly new acquisition and they were just starting to make the pivot to target women. They were a pretty like egalitarian, masculine brand until the pivot happened and they decided to go more towards women's fashion. So for a time, there were some people that worked on both brands. And then there was a woman who was one of my mentors who went on maternity leave. And then I did an extended piece to fill in for that and then continue working on the brand for Sorel.
Gotcha.
Which was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was fun.
I'm going to pause 1 second. My dog is scratching at the door. He's never done this.
Come on it.
I'm so sorry. Hold on 1 second.
No apologies necessary. We have a 10-year-old or almost 10-year-old golden retriever.
Oh, I had one interview I did their dog, their golden, I think it was a lab actually, just had surgery. So he was wearing the giant cone and all you heard was him bumping into stuff during like the first part of the interview. She's like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, totally fine. Totally fine.
I love her.
So I want to ask you about Sorel because you said it's fantastic. This is shoes, right? We're talking about shoes.
Yeah. Yeah. Predominantly it was winter boots. So definitely had like the technology of like a snow boot, but they started doing things where it had like fur and heels and things like that around the time. And they also launched a summer line, spring summer line while I was there as well.
Okay. So where did you make the switch? Because eventually you make the switch to the wine industry, St. Michel Wine Estates.
Yeah, I loved my time at Columbia Sportswear and Sorel, but I think working there for I think it was 3 to 4 years, 4 to 5 years that I was there, the one thing that I think was hard for me was the seasonality of every season. There's a new product to replace the old product. There was new technologies. And I just kind of was looking at my career holistically and was thinking, I want something that has a bit more substance, especially because I was doing more of like the lifestyle writers. I wasn't doing gear and tech and technology and working with some of the innovation team at Columbia Sportswear. And I had an agency partner at the time who I was close with her, and she introduced me to somebody who was leading the PR department at St. Michel Wine Estates. And so that was really my first intro into food and wine. I did a very short stint to get me up to Seattle while I was still in conversations with St. Michel at Greenvelope, which was a very weird stint in my career and did not last long. It was a digital invitation software company, and realized very quickly that is not for me.
Nice.
That was when I was having conversations with St. Michel. So it got me up to Seattle, and St. Michel is based in Woodinville, right outside of Seattle.
Yeah. And I was looking up because I've heard of St. Michel wines, obviously, but then I didn't realize the St. Michel Wine Estates, they actually support different wine brands.
Yeah, they're pretty big. Yeah, a lot. They are one of I don't know what they are now, but when I had left, I think they were the third biggest wine estate or entity within the US wine category.
Yeah.
Gallo, Constellation, St. Michel's up there with that. So it was almost how it was structured was very similar, almost like an agency. So they had different tiers and categories internally of that you could work on the luxury tier, the consumer tier, the import export business, where St. Michel would partner with wineries or wine estates outside of the US that wanted to bring in their wine and needed a marketing partner and a distribution and sales partner. So St. Michel would act as that. And within that, I got to work on two of the different categories. So I was working on the luxury tier, and I also worked on the consumer tier. So like Columbia Crest, Chateau St. Michel, two of the ones that were more like, you might find at a grocery store. You weren't going to like a specialty wine shop. And the price point's a little bit more approachable as well.
Yeah. And some of the other brand, I mean, Erath, A to Z, 14 Hands, Chateau St. Michel, Rex Hill, just to name, a little handful. Because I looked this up and I was like, no way. Because, I just feel it's interesting when I was looking into, you and your company, and these are companies that I've, never heard of. I didn't even realize St. Michel Wine Estates was like a thing. But then you see these brands that you're familiar with, and it has a very strange feeling, right? It's like, oh, I know that brand. So then this company must be okay.
Yeah, totally. It's interesting. The beverage industry at large, and you probably know this, both on the spirit side and on the wine side, especially if you walk into a grocery store and their spirit selection or their wine selection, so many of those individual brands that from a consumer standpoint are individual brands are actually owned and operated by the same 4 to 5 companies. So that was also a learning opportunity for me. I didn't realize that dynamic within the beverage industry until starting at St. Michel.
So I guess a question for you. I mean, part of me thinks that's a good thing, and then part of me is like, is that a good thing? Is that not negative, but is it something where we're grouping all of these wines together in this one company, and so is the message going to be the same for all of them? Are they going to have individuality? I mean, is that a thing?
I think that there's a place for both, for independents as well as these larger. I think the value that being a part of a larger organization like a St. Michelle is that you do get a lot of experts and people who are super passionate who can all lend their minds collectively to figuring out some challenges that may be really hard, that also provides funding. Winemaking is incredibly expensive and can be something that's really hard to even make a little bit of money. So doing it in a collective way, I think can help. And I think a lot of this comes from wine culture in the sense of like even in parts of France and parts of Italy, there's like cooperatives, right? Where it has that same mentality of we can't really do this alone, but we need to do this together and we need to market together. But we're still going to acknowledge the differences of the terroir and the wines. So I think that there's a place. I don't think that if the entire wine industry or spirits industry was just one or the other, I think it would be an issue. But because it is still, there's still plenty of amazing independents that are producing spirits or wine, and there's also quite a few big ones. The problem I think is sometimes that the big ones do have a lot of placement because they do have a lot of sway. And so I think that's a challenge for the independents and continues to be a challenge when you're trying to get into a grocery store wine selection. It's an uphill battle if you're independent.
Just trying to survive, right? I see that all across this state of Oregon. I'm sure you're very well aware of it. In Southern Oregon, we have some, bigger wineries here that kind of, they are the consistent ones. They get a lot of traffic. And then we have these like little small independent producers that some don't have tasting rooms, some do have tasting rooms. And so I see it all the time. It's a challenge for those guys to get into restaurants, to get into a grocery store, and they just have to, they're doing all the things. They're the winemaker, they're the bottling team, they're their own marketing team. So yeah, I see that all the time. So that does make a lot of sense.
And I think one of the one power of social media and the digital landscape and how it's evolved in the last 10 years is it does allow a brand the opportunity to have a direct to consumer relationship and almost cut out some of the different partners you may need, like a grocery store partner, at least to the same extent that you might needed it 20 years ago.
Right.
So I know one brand, we've never worked with her, but I've been following her journey. Sophie James Wines out of Sonoma, like she has created a really, really strong social media, all within in-house of her wine brand and a direct to consumer wine club channel. And so I think that's an example of a great way to use social to reach that goal and kind of cut out the middleman a bit.
Yeah, go Sophie. I love that. I love those stories. So why Curate? And is it Curate & Co. or Curate & Company?
Curate & Co. is usually what we call it. Yeah. Okay. Like why the name?
Well, no, where did this idea come from? Because I'm assuming you're working still at St. Michelle Wine Estates, right? And then, absolutely. I mean, what was your aha moment? What was the light bulb moment for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. A couple of things that led to me starting Curate & Co. One, the beverage industry is a bit behind often, not as much now, but especially 10 years ago, moving from apparel with a kind of a little bit of a tech side to beverage, things like social media, paid social, we were light years behind when it came to, if you were to compare us with tech industries, apparel, beauty. And so I saw that there was an opportunity of creating an agency that is a boutique agency that specializes in that can try to move the needle for brands that want to move the needle in that space. And I also had an amazing mentor at St. Michelle. And when I had sounded the idea like, hey, I'm thinking of starting something, maybe it's freelance, maybe it's an agency. She had told me, Amanda, I have budget for 2 of my brands. If you can start this in the next 6 months, you will be our agency of record for like these 2, which was insane and amazing. And so St. Michelle was my first client, which also, as we're talking about St. Michelle, such a giant in the beverage industry, it was a huge legitimizer for us of having that experience. And we got to work. So we were working at the time with Pat's and Hall and with the Antinoris, which is like a massive wine estate in Italy and their sub brand Santa Cristina, which is like their direct to consumer, more consumer focused brand.
So, with the idea of this, was it just something that you, I guess, well, you break it down for me. Like, is it just something that you were like, this is what I want to do? I want to start my own company? Because that's, like I said, when we started, that's scary.
Um, I think the big motivator of like why then did I start it was that so at the time my now husband and I were just about to get married and he was a pilot in the Navy. And so he was getting stationed in Jacksonville, Florida. And I remember we had like a year and a half lead time knowing this might happen. And I was still in house at St. Michelle. And I kept thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do in Jacksonville, Florida? I'd never been. I mean, that's about as far as you can go. At the time we were living in Seattle, of like literally it's a diagonal line from one corner to the other corner. There's obviously not a robust wine community there. And it was a little unknown to me. And so I kept thinking, how can I still have this tie to this industry that I love? And also, I've been percolating on this idea of a specific niche that I think I could do really well. Maybe this is the right time. Because in my head, I think leading up to that, I kept thinking, I'll do it later when I have more experience, maybe in 10 years, maybe in 15 years. But that was I think the push to say, what the heck, let's just try it. And if I fail, I fail. No harm, no foul. At least I say I tried. And then I think having that conversation with my mentor, it was just it was a security blanket of at least I have a client. Like that's a starting point and I can start from there and I can grow. And the rest, yeah.
Yeah. So many questions. And I guess as a PR company, and my knowledge in PR is it's teeny tiny. How do you get clients? Like is it word of mouth? Are you out there knocking on doors? Like, how does that work?
Most of it is word of mouth and has historically been. We definitely have started in the last couple years going to a couple different events every year. So different trade shows, different food and beverage events, both consumer facing and trade facing. But I would say like 90% of our clients historically have been referral based. So existing clients or friends of the brand will introduce us.
Okay. And then the goal, tell me if I'm wrong here, but the goal is to obviously like these brands have them become household names, right? So they appear on the Today Show or in a magazine. Am I
Definitely.
Passing PR school yet?
Absolutely. You're doing a great job. You want a job?
Maybe.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so our clients come in and it kind of depends on what stage of the business they're in. So some of our clients are more household names. They're existing. They understand their story. They understand their products and they want to stay relevant. Other brands are coming to us. They're new and they're emerging and they want to launch or introduce the brand or products to PR. And so depending on what stage they're at, we will either act as, let's help tell me everything and I'm going to help curate your story. I'm going to help tell your story in a compelling way. I'm going to pick out what these different pieces or parts of your product that I think are going to be relevant to media and of course to your end consumer. And I'm going to help tell that story and to get exactly what you said with the end goal of getting them this great press coverage that can live both within the press coverage, but also can be used as a legitimizer. It can be used on their website where they can say, hey, we've been featured in the Today Show or Cosmopolitan or Food and Wine. And it helps make customers feel warm and fuzzies when they come to their website that it's a good product.
I love that. And I love that you said story because I wrote down storytelling. This is my new soapbox in life is storytelling and how incredibly important it is. And so we're going to get there for sure. Your mission, obviously, as this marketing agency, I mean, obviously, yes, you're in it to be successful and make money. I get that. But I feel like for you, just reading the things that I've read about you, it really is this drive and passion to make other brands successful, right? And like, I mean, really, you have to believe in these brands if you're going to market them.
Yes. And we are really selective of who we take on as clients. And so our entire team needs to be jazzed and super excited and believe in the product for us to take on a new client, because I think that when we're passionate about the product or the story, it lends itself to all the facets that we do PR, but we also do content creation or influencer relations or social media. For each of those different categories, it needs to have a good story. And for us to do our job well, we need to craft a good story.
I just wrote that down. In order for you to be passionate about something, I have to buy into the story. Like I have to, and not even buy in, that's the wrong word. I have to really love and feel the story. So yes, this is my new soapbox, because I do help promote some wineries here through video production, which is my first love. But I tell them all the time, like, don't just show me a bottle of wine on social media and say, we're releasing this. What's the story behind it? Like where'd the grapes come from? Is this a wine that you've been wanting to make for years and years? You know, why is this special? Why is it different? Why is it unique? Tell me a story. Don't just put a picture. Give me a face. Tell me something. Like, tell me a story.
Yes, I could not agree with that more, truly.
And I think, I mean, your advice, because I'm hoping that some listeners today are those little independent wine producers who are like, I need help in the PR world. Where should they start? Is it social media? So should they just start putting their story out on social media?
Yeah. That's the most cost effective. If you are bootstrapped and looking to get your story out, I'd say social media is one of the easiest tools. It can feel frustrating because the algorithm is ever changing, but I think long-term consistent social media, and even before that, it goes back to what you had mentioned earlier, storytelling. Like you have to have a good idea of what your story is. So like some of our clients will say, hey, we have capabilities in-house, or like I have the bandwidth as the owner to do our social, but I need help from an outside perspective. What is my story? What's cool? What's interesting? Like it's hard because sometimes it is really hard for us to think that about ourselves or about our own brand, and somebody else can come in and say, this is so blaringly obvious. Here's your story. Here's your selling points. And this is what you need to do. And then I think the other piece of that is also consistency. Like you have got to post a lot and consistently. And it can feel like you're posting the same content over and over again. But because of the algorithm, the same person probably isn't going to see it over and over again.
100%. I used to say that to my reporters all the time. Like, you kind of have to repeat yourself, because you can't assume that the viewer has been watching this story since day one when it broke. Like you have to be a little bit repetitive. And you just hit it. Consistency with social. Sorry guys, but you've got to post a lot and you've got to post consistently.
Okay.
Yeah. How do you pair products with influencers? Because we see it all the time, right? On social, there's this like big social influencer and they're like, I'm buying Crate and Barrel. It's like, how did that happen?
It's a great question. It's a little bit data driven and a little bit aesthetic. So when one of our clients comes to us and says, hey, we're interested in doing an influencer campaign, some of the initial questions that we'll often ask are, okay, let's talk about goals. Is your goal awareness? Is your goals sales, like direct sales? Is it content creation that you can repurpose and use for advertisements, for social? Because all of that goes into picking the perfect person, right? Also because in today's day and age, influencers can be really expensive. I mean, they have a real service to offer, and it is monetized at this point, way more than it was, even from when I first started Curate Co. And so from there, we can start having a conversation of, okay, our number one goal is this. We understand your brand aesthetic, and ideally we're looking for influencers who can complement or match that aesthetic. So if we were to repurpose a post and put it in the feed of our client, it looks right. It feels right. The people who are attracted to this influencer are attracted to the brand. And then it's a lot of data. So understanding who is the following of that influencer, and a lot of that comes from us reaching out and having a conversation with the influencer, what their engagement rate is. Engagement rates can vary a lot. And I think it's super important because two influencers could have the exact same following, but one gets way more engagements. And so you need to put that into consideration for pricing. You shouldn't pay them both the same, even if they both have 50,000 followers.
Yeah.
And also now that Reels and TikTok are such a huge piece. Also understanding the platforms, where do they excel, and also it always changes things if they have an agent because that also increases the pricing. So it's also a budget question of
Ooh.
does this fit our budget and putting the pieces together to make everything work.
Well, I'm glad you're here. Good grief.
It's complicated. I think people see that an influencer post is on their feed and they're like, oh, somebody just sent them product. But there's a lot of work that goes into it if it's done right. I think it can also be done wrong and often is done wrong.
Yeah. I mean, even I have a very small following on social, but I will get random emails from PR companies. They're like, Trish, do you want to try this, powdered beef or something? And I'm like, no, thanks.
I don't, that looks good.
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks. Speaking of influencers and social, I tend to, I'm an old fart, I'm going to be 44 this year, 45 this year. And I just
But
feel
I
like,
hope that doesn't make us old farts. I'm not 44 yet, but that does not make me an old fart.
I mean, in the world of social, I think,
Okay.
and
Touche. Touche.
we live and die by social media. I think just like, in news, we would live and die by the ratings. If the ratings were good, we were like, oh, this rating system is perfect. It works great. If we got bad ratings, it was like, it's skewed. We were robbed. And I think the same thing with social media, right? Like I love social media sometimes when I'm getting lots of love on social media. And then I can just I hate it. I hate it some days.
I totally agree. I have a love-hate relationship with social media, and my hate is more how it sucks us in and is such a time suck on everyone.
Yeah.
And of myself personally, like I'll have to take breaks. I'm like, and part of it is work, but the other part of it is it's just really good at sucking you in and showing you content that you just keep scrolling. But I think social has a lot of great power, but it also, especially when we think about the next generation of kids and how they're coming of age with digital everywhere, like that's not something that either of us experienced. And so I think that's something that I think a lot about with social, of like, how do we regulate that? How do we make sure that we're protecting the next generation from this? Because me as an adult consuming is very different than a child consuming.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that. And I think too, it is such a valuable tool right now. I mean, you just gave us a ton of examples. And so a lot of people are like, oh, I hate social media. I'm never on social media. And it's like, well, it's part of my job, sadly. Like I have to rely on it some days to, promote this interview, promote my podcast. I mean, that's just how it works.
It's so true. And we've had some amazing long-term clients that have found us on social media. And so I think there is definitely a power and a beauty of social. It's also a great way for creative expression and people who, want to be great photographers, videographers, recipe creators, or learn about a new category. Like there's a lot of value in it, but there's definitely, with most things, you have to have some caution going into.
For sure. I want to talk about storytelling just a little bit again, because it is my new passion in life. I feel like it doesn't take a lot, right, for someone to sit down and go, okay, what is my story? And again, you hit it. It may not be interesting and obvious to you. So I guess how does one kind of figure out what is interesting about their story? Do they tell it to somebody else?
So when we take on a new client, we often do some really extensive briefing calls where we have tons of questions that are part of that, depending on the client. And our team is well enough versed of what's going to resonate. And, we're constantly consuming media ourselves. So we understand what's trending, what's not trending, what are hot topics for media. And what are things that are maybe, old news. And so we typically will often do this really extensive briefing process throughout the first month of a relationship. And then we'll take a step back and start sifting through and curating what are the key pieces of information, and also segmentation. So something that maybe is super beverage geeky about a production or a distillate or how something is produced might be a really great story for a spirits writer. But if I pitch that to, I don't know, InStyle, who does great roundups and would be fantastic for a brand to be. That's not the same story that's going to resonate with them. So there's a lot about media segmentation too, of figuring out what are all the stories, how would we segment, and are they all complementing each other?
Right.
So if one person reads this and one person reads this, they're two different sides of the story, but they still kind of fit together with a holistic brand direction.
Sure. So you are essentially, if you have this, a client, let's say they make bubbles, but they do it in a really cool way, you can send the techie story to this media outlet or this magazine, and the pretty label, it's pink, it's fresh, to Glamour magazine, and be like, hey, look, wine for summer.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So in a given, especially if it's a new product or a new brand launch, we might have anywhere from 4 to 10 segmentations of like micro stories that we're developing and then segmenting out media lists to make sure that if we send something out to journalists, it's the right fit. That's the end goal, at least.
Sure. Because I mean, I just know from news days, like, a pitch can mean first story, top story of the day, or it can mean like, why would we do that? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Delete.
Yeah. Delete, delete, delete. So with your company, how many clients does Curate & Co have right now?
14, I believe, is the current
Nice.
list.
That's a nice little number.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a nice place to be right now. I feel like we've kind of found our groove with that. Yeah.
And it's food, beverage, and hospitality. So all the things that like small boutique inns and hotels, things like that too.
Yeah, so that's actually something we're looking to grow into.
Okay.
We've done plenty of restaurants. We've never done a hotel property, and it's something so many of our media contacts are in the travel space. We've done destination spaces for tasting rooms and things like that, but we've never had a hotel client. So it is on one of my personal goals the next year is to land our first hotel client. So if you
Beautiful.
know of anyone, send them
Well,
our way.
we just put it out in the universe, girl. Like it's going to happen.
We're manifesting.
We we are manifesting. That's another hot button word some people love hate.
Absolutely.
With going back to storytelling just a second, because I just looked down at my notes. It's also important, and I say this a lot when I'm helping people kind of figure out their story. You have to know who you are, right?
Yeah, you absolutely do. And I think an agency can help you fine tune it, but if you have no direction, it's really hard. And I don't think it sets up anyone for success. So, and I think within a brand, it can be a couple different things as like a starting point. You can either know what your product is, like you can really like you have fine tuned and that product is perfect, but maybe you don't know how you as the founder or the CEO or the brand needs some positioning. Like that is an okay place to start, I think, to hire an agency. Or you understand your brand and you're still fine tuning, like, who am I trying to sell to? Or what is my product? But if you don't have any of those things, I would say don't hire at least a PR agency, maybe a branding agency would make sense. But like, it's going to be a waste of money because we don't have a place to start.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, when I left the news, and I'm sorry, I keep going back to news. That was my world for such a long time. But everyone was like, what's your brand going to be? And I'm like, huh? My brand? I don't know. Like, I'm going to have this podcast and I'm going to do some crap on social media. I don't know. But it is this, I feel like it would be a level of success for some people when they have a brand and it's like, this is my brand and I've made it because this is my brand.
I completely agree. And I
Okay.
think it is hard. I think it's hard when the brand, and we've seen this with some of our clients in the past, when the brand is so tied to a person and not a product. Like, I think that's even harder. Like, that is a challenge. Like, you as like your brand is really hard because as people, we're ever evolving, we're ever changing, we're multifaceted. And so to have a brand, you're also kind of putting yourself in a box sometimes, which can be, as we were talking about earlier, super helpful in how you're pitching yourself. People can easily talk about you. Like when I was starting Curate Co, I had a lot of people tell me I should not have such a narrow focus of food and beverage. And I was very firm on the fact that I wanted that because it let people talk about me very clearly. Oh, Amanda started Curate Co. They do food and beverage. And that was, so I think that it helps, but it's also harder if it's a person versus an entity or a product or a separate business that has nothing directly to do with the person. The person is the head of it and the face of it and the spokesperson.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Do you have a success story with a client? I'm sure they're all probably success stories, but one that you were just like, man, we nailed it. We just nailed it with this campaign or this particular client.
Yeah, we have a couple. One that I am incredibly proud of, because I know we talked a lot throughout today about those smaller startup, like bootstrapped. We work with and have worked with for quite a few years, Curd Box, which is a cheese subscription box. So they curate 3 cheeses and 3 food pairings, and on a monthly basis, they ship out these boxes. And so we partnered, I think we started with them. It was in the middle of the pandemic. So I think it was 2021, when obviously people were looking for home experiences. They couldn't go out to eat as much, they couldn't travel as much. And we worked with Jen, who's the founder and CEO, and we nailed it with press. Like, we had so much amazing press that we landed for them. I mean, everything from the Today Show, The Strategist, New Yorker, Food and Wine. So it was everywhere within a year. And what was really encouraging, and I think personally I was really excited about, is Jen was also super open with us about sales data and how much the company was growing. And she was not investing in any other marketing tactic. It was only what we were doing for her. So it was really gratifying to know, okay, we are investing a lot of time and energy into this, but it's, tripling sales throughout a couple of years. So that was really exciting, because it was a small brand that was really only known in New England when we started. And by the end of, we did like a 2-year big PR push. And by the end of that, it was something that people on the West Coast were like, oh, I've heard of Curd Box. I think I saw them.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was exciting.
That's got to feel so good too, because again, at the end of the day, you're helping this other human grow this business that they absolutely are passionate about.
Yeah, agreed.
Ugh, I love that so much. Well, we're going to wrap up a little bit. We've been chatting for 46 minutes and it feels like we've been chatting for 10.
I agree. I knew this was going to happen when we had our conversation in July.
I did too. Yeah. Which, by the way, you were visiting, where were you? San Juan Islands?
Yes, I was on Lopez, which is where my mom and my stepdad live now full time.
Gorgeous. You were there for what, a week or 2 weeks?
3 weeks. And then we went down for a family reunion to Sun River, Oregon.
Oh, I love Sun River. Sun River's such a beautiful spot. Bend is so beautiful. That's the thing about this state. And when we were chatting earlier, when I tell people I'm from Oregon or I live in Oregon, their eyes kind of light up. I mean, I just feel like our little state could break away into the ocean and we would be just fine. We've got just such great water and agriculture, and then wine and hops and beer and spirits.
Totally agree. It has a little bit of everything: the desert, the mountains, the forest, the ocean. Like, it's everything.
Yeah, no, it's such a great state. But yeah, I so appreciate you sharing some of this like PR information, because I really hope it's gonna maybe spark a little inspiration for some listeners out there who are, kind of struggling with their small business and really wanting to push it forward. So thanks for sharing all the tips and tricks.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I agree. This has been an amazing conversation.
Well, I'm not letting you go yet, because there's the final three. Oh. Okay. Because I prepped you. I only prep guests on my final 3. Okay. Best advice you've ever been given.
Follow your gut.
Ooh, I love that kind of advice. Who gave that to you, or is it just something you had?
A couple people that I've worked with have, since starting Curate Co, have told me that. And then that's also the number one piece of advice I always give now that I'm like entering into the 8th year, because I think back to any of the challenges or really, crap moments of the last 8 years. And it's typically when I have a gut feeling and I talk myself into doing something that I think is probably not the best idea. And it turns out it was actually a really bad idea.
Yeah, I found that's interesting, because I will often follow my gut too. And I'll say, should I do this or should I do this? And then everybody's telling me to do this one over here. And then the more I think about it, I'm just like, but my gut says, don't do that. Don't do it that way. Do it this way. And it's always right.
It always is. Our gut knows.
It truly does. Our gut is really smart, actually. With like just like reading, this is really gross, but like reading about, like probiotics and like all the bacteria in our gut is brilliant.
It is. I've started reading about this too, about how much it really controls and some of the theories. It is, which I think adds a whole other layer to the follow your gut, advice of also take care of your gut, I guess, if I'm gonna follow it.
I was just gonna say that. Kimchi, people, kimchi and probiotics.
I'm pretty sure I have here it is. I have my seed probiotics refill that I just got. So yeah.
Perfect. Okay. What's your happy place?
Sun River is one, but I'm going to cheat and say a second one too. I have been to a couple times to Hania on the island of Crete in Greece, and it is stunning. I did my honeymoon there. My husband lived there for like 7 months. And we took our whole family there 4 or 5 years ago. And it is a magical place that feels untouched and has like secret beaches and wine tasting and delicious food. And it's amazing.
Okay, I shall put that on my list, but we won't tell anybody else about it. It'll just, keep that secret. In all things food and drink, what do you crave? What always sounds good?
Gluten-free pizza. That's really, really good. I'm gluten-free. And so finding really good pizza is incredibly hard. So I crave really good, like the fluffy, bubbly, gluten-free pizza.
Yeah, that is hard to find.
Really hard to find.
A good gluten-free crust that's like pillowy.
Yes. And there's some places I've found. I've also tried to perfect my own. There's a pizza shop in Manhattan called Keste, and they have one of the best that I found. And I found on a very small blog that one of their chefs posted about the flour blend that he imports from Italy. So now I have bought that in bulk, and I have started making my own pizza crust with this, and it's actually pretty good.
Good for you.
Pretty good.
Good for you. I love a good project like that. Amanda Arrigotti-White, thank you so much. You have been so much fun, and I've learned so much today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, we're gonna stay connected because I just feel like I told you you're an overachiever. And I love an overachiever. So I'm gonna keep track. I'm gonna keep track of what you're doing with this business. Congratulations on year 8. It's amazing.
Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to staying in touch.
You've been listening to Hungry for More, an Epicurean's Dilemma with me, Trish Close. You can watch this podcast and subscribe on my YouTube channel. Just search Hungry for More, an Epicurean's Dilemma. You can also listen and subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts.